Thank you all for joining Gainfront's webinar on the continued strategic importance of supplier diversity. We will give the attendees another minute to join and then begin the webinar. We can get started.
Okay. First of all, good morning, good afternoon, good day to all attendees, depending on what time zone you are. Just a quick thumbs up to the panelists. If you can hear me, right? Loud and clear.
Yes.
Fantastic. Thank you. So welcome to the first in our 2024 webinar series. My name is Shrikant Sharma, and I am involved closely with Gainfront. And what and so this is the first of our 2024 webinar series. The topic of today's webinar is going to be the continued strategic importance of supplier diversity. So before I introduce the panelists, I want to also just give a context of what the goal of this webinar is. With the disruption to global supply chains, the macroeconomic conditions in the marketplace, the overall focus on greater diversity, ethical sourcing, and also eliminating negative practices such as child labor, conflict minerals, the focus on fair trade sourcing. We are seeing an unprecedented focus on global procurement practices and solutions in general, and supplier diversity in particular. So in this webinar, we'd like to counter this view heads on and address how diversity, especially supplier diversity in supply chains, continues to play a vital and strategic role in improving not just your company's performance, but also that of the larger community as well. So with that, to help us understand this issue better, allow me to introduce our distinguished panel of experts. We've got two. We are really fortunate, and I'm excited to introduce Dr. Stephanie Smith and Al Lewis. So Dr. Stephanie Smith, if you could please wave, currently leads the Supplier Diversity Program at Edward Jones. This is the latest in a long line of contributions to supplier diversity that she's had, spanning over 20 years. Dr. Smith has directly helped develop inclusion programs that have spanned from $1 million all the way up to $2.5 billion. Also joining us is Al Lewis, who currently heads DEI initiatives at AMN Health. Over the course of his career, Al has helped supplier diversity, has been a subject matter expert in supplier diversity, and has worked with NMSDC, board member roles on both the Michigan and the California Supplier Diversity Councils, global strategic committee member for the We Connect International, and chair of the Canadian Inclusive Procurement Leadership Roundtable. Welcome, Al and Dr. Smith, and thank you for your participation. So the format for this webinar is going to be, we're going to have a robust discussion among us. Obviously, I'll be moderating, and we will be hearing the wisdom from both Dr. Smith and Al, and then we will leave time for Q&A at the end. So if you could please enter your questions in the chat, we will make sure that the moderator, the facilitator of the webinar, kind of points out the questions. I'll read through them. and we'll definitely have Al and Dr. Smith weigh in on that. That being said, now let's dive into some key topics of discussion. So I guess the first one which comes top of mind is, why is supplier diversity important? And while it might seem obvious, why do companies prioritize hiring of diverse suppliers? What are the examples from your respective companies on tangible benefits created through your respective supplier diversity programs? Let's start with Dr. Smith.
Thank you very much. Within Edward Jones, what we have found is with diverse suppliers, we can increase the competitiveness, add flexibility, reduce costs, and then we're also demonstrating a good stewardship when it comes to our resources that reflect the communities that we live, work, and serve. The inclusion of the diverse firms has come through the inclusion of RFP processes, corporate interest in identifying the diverse firms with the myriad of business units. So we look at opportunities and we try to engage diverse firms and make sure they have an opportunity to participate in our procurement process. The benefits are that now our business units have a lot of different a lot of different businesses that they have access to, which have a different way of maybe doing business, and sometimes it's beneficial. Sometimes we need companies that are more flexible. Sometimes it's cost. Sometimes it's more innovation. So it has been beneficial, and those are some of the tangible benefits that we've experienced.
Great. Al?
Yeah, when you think about why the question why supplier diversity, um, you have to go back to the reason why a corporation um, engages in this strategy or program. And supplier diversity has a long history. It started with an executive order back in 1971. And from there, we've been building traction and getting history and examples, empirical evidence that diverse suppliers in your value chain or your supply chain, be it if you're a service or a manufacturing organization, creates innovation. And we need that innovation today. In our specifically today, when you think about competition, when you think about having a competitive edge in your value chain or supply chain, supply diversity breeds that just by virtue of creating competition, creating diversity, right? And it's something that we've had a long time to learn, right? We've created best practices that drive supply diversity in organizations. And then I'm gonna stop at this next one. Supply diversity internally is important because it shows that the organization itself believes all these different principles and things that I've mentioned, in that they're engaging with professionals to help create this value chain, this diverse value chain in the marketplace, and they recognize that, in fact, it is something that helps to improve sourcing board activity. It improves buyer activity within the procurement role. So we're continuing to kind of move forward with this, but I think at the bottom line is supply diversity drives, or supply diversity is an economic imperative because it helps to improve our overall GDP.
No, spot on. I think that's great. So as you think about supply diversity, what are the lessons and best practices on what would you recommend, given your wealth of experience, both of you, on how to set up a supply diversity program? I mean, how do you connect supply diversity with the broader corporate goals? And how can you use that to, and drive executive engagement from sponsors? Just overall, could you please speak to like best practices when you think about this? Al?
Well, as I said earlier, supply diversity is it's is not new, right? It originally was established with 8 best practices. And the 8 best practices, the very first best practice is something that an organization has to do. Let me say that differently, must do if it in fact expects to be at some point in time a world-class um, solution in the marketplace. And that first best practice is you have to establish a corporate policy, and you have to get top corporate management support with appropriate resources and involvement with certification organizations. So there's 4 things there. You have to have a corporate policy that talks about your program and the commitment that your senior level CEO folks have. 2, those folks that sign off on this, you really need your CEO to sign off on it, are your top corporate management support, right? And then you, as a supplier diversity professional, you have to have resources in order to do that, tools and techniques that help to drive supplier diversity. And then you have to connect yourself with the NGOs that literally drive this in the marketplace, connect you with strategic connections and solutions for your organization that meets the needs, pains, and gains of the organization. And so the supply diversity is not an island by itself. It has to be connected with the enterprise. That's how you get the juice. That's how you get the commitment. That's how you get the support that you need in the organization. And then the other 7, there's really 12 best practices, but 8 that are really being used today across the nation. And maybe later on I can go through those other 7, but I'm going to stop there and allow Dr. Smith to comment as well.
So what we did in aligning with those 8, we went so here are some of the tangible things. We developed internal governance groups. One of which works as a collaborative with different business units, because we have a myriad of different business units. Like Al said, we are not an island, and it's very difficult for 1 or 2 people to get the message across. But by developing this collaborative, we reach out to different business units, we engage them in what we're doing, and they in turn help us to get the message out, and they also help to build the program. We also work very closely with sourcing. So we have a governance group in sourcing, because one of the things, and I'm sure Al can attest to, is we have to know what's coming up, how to get involved, and what diverse firms will have an opportunity. And that goes back to being aligned with the different entities. Something else, supplier diversity is not only aligned in our organization with finance, we're aligned with diversity, equity, and inclusion, and we're also aligned with the managing partners. This gives us the leadership engagement, which is crucial to maintaining a program. We have to have the leaderships involved. They have to be engaged. As Al said, it becomes a culture for us. So with that, if we don't have the leadership involved, we don't have, we're just kind of spinning our wheels. But also
Exactly.
those 8 steps, we have to educate our personnel. We're always having conscious conversations about what's going on. We, as supplier diversity personnel, have to understand the internal processes, but then we have to educate them that diverse businesses don't take away. There's a benefit added. And we have to create awareness, and we have to make sure that our supplier diversity programs are aligned with the businesses. So I can't go and do a cookie cutter from what Al does and vice versa. We're in different industries. So we have to align with what the industry and the cultures that we have to. And then again, we also have to get the buy-in from our colleagues, because they're the ones that carry the message also. So if I'm sitting working with finance or whatever and sourcing, and I'm not talking to them and they're not buying in, then we're not getting anywhere. So these are kind of the 8 that we focus on, the 8, but these are the actual steps that we take in integrating those 8 steps.
Shrikant, let me add one more thing. It's extremely important. If I started my conversation right, I would have started with this. Supply diversity is not intuitive.
Absolutely not.
It is not. And that's where a lot of organizations make mistakes, right? They start and they go based on what they think they know. What it's just not an intuitive. There's a very specific set of technical skills that's required to drive a supplier diversity program. And this is what sometimes makes it difficult because folks in the organization think that it's intuitive. It is not. It is not an intuitive profession. There are folks who study supplier diversity, get certified in supplier diversity in order for them to really drive a world-class supplier diversity program. And the last thing is you have to have a strategy. The strategy must connect with the enterprise strategy in order to give the supplier diversity program legs. So thank you for allowing me to add those last 2
Oh,
points.
no, that's a really key point. The fact that it's not intuitive is, I think there's evidence of that in the sense of, you mentioned it was started back in the early 70s, 1971 to be precise. We are now decades, many decades in since then, and the companies are still kind of trying to find their footing on a successful supply diversity program. So that alone speaks to the fact that it's not an automatic, it's not intuitive. Then there is a set of skills, policies, practices, sponsorships, all of that stuff. So great, thank you for that. So I guess that segues to, how would you go about finding new and diverse suppliers, and how do you, there's obviously mandated spend goals for diversity. How does one go about finding those supplier skills? I'm sorry, supplier diverse suppliers.
Certifying agencies. You have to start with those certifying agencies first, because they have the databases. They're the ones that go out and actually go through the due diligence to make sure those firms meet the guidelines to be certified as, whether they are minority, women-owned, veteran-owned, disabled. The list is NGLCC. There's quite a few of them. And there's a lot of self-certifying, which is not necessarily mean that they're certified through the proper agencies. So we start with the self-certifying agencies. We start there first. So we start with NMSDC, WeBank, NGLCC, Veterans Administration, and Disability IN. Those are just a few of them to start with. That's where we start. We're looking for those diverse firms. And then as far as our spend targets, we have to work with the sourcing. We have to work with the different business units to see what is out there, what they're doing, and then be able to look at opportunities and niches to build it. But our spend targets start with benchmarking. We've had to benchmark where we were before a program and where we hope to be. So that's how we really look at our spend targets. But we work very closely with sourcing, and we work very closely with the different business units.
Yeah, I agree with that. It is extremely important that anyone who's starting or has started and trying to get an initial program set up, that you start right. In order for you to have a good program, you have to start right. And starting right means that you understand the purpose of certification. Certification authenticates that the MBE, WBE, Disability Inc., veteran, small business entity are 51% owned, operated, and controlled. A lot of folks just look at owned. The reason why the NMSDC is one of the most prominent certifying bodies is they take the MBEs through a rigorous certification process. They have to prove through process and documents that they are owned by the MBE, and then through other processes within the certification process prove that they operate and that they're controlled by this organization. Operate means that they manage it day to day. There's not a another person that's running the business. Controlled means that there's no interference or anyone else engaged in making decisions or can possibly be an interruption in the business because the entity itself does not control the business. So this certification is extremely important because corporations rely on the authenticity of the business, and each one of these NGOs, in fact, help us get there because we're not going to go out and do this rigorous process of of showing and determining that a business is owned, operated, and controlled. Earlier in my life, I was the director for the Michigan Minority Supplier Development um, certification team. And so I know firsthand that there's a lot of work that is done in order to certify. It's why it takes 60 to 90 days in order for a business to be considered certified. So we use these organizations to make sure that we're diversifying our value chains with truly authenticated small and diverse businesses.
Right. No, so the one thing which an adjunct to that question would be, so these agencies and certifying organizations and they're phenomenal. They tend, would it be fair to say they tend to have a very heavy focus in the more development in North America, for example, or in some cases in Europe. But as you are sourcing global suppliers, let's say China or other Mexico or other geographies or theaters that may not have as robust a database, would that be a place where, for example, technology tools which have access to supplier databases, which can help you source diverse suppliers, which have certification and attestation programs, which can help you qualify and scorecard these vendors. You know, somebody new who might not be in a certain database, for example, from China, as an example, might say, look, we want to participate in this program, but they're not necessarily part in a directory. So is that where, what is your view on how technology can help facilitate and accelerate that, especially as you go into the global market, which is what a big focus now and disruption tends to be driving towards?
I would agree with that, Shrikant. Technology is extremely important, and one of the best practices says that you need to have a good tracking, monitoring, tracking, and reporting um, technology SaaS solution that's going to help you get there, because to do it on a large spreadsheet is just impossible. You only know what you know, and your Excel spreadsheets can only tell you what it knows. So when you're connected to technology, especially if you have a global program, you can look into China MSD, right? You can look into your SaaS solution, which is connected to these different sources around the world that says, yes, there's this supplier who's certified. China MSD has certified a supplier in technology or a supplier in making widgets. Or you can go to the to the to the UK MSD using your SaaS solution. All of these suppliers are in a specific SaaS solution that can help you manage your global program, right? And Canada and Australia, and then with WeBank across Europe. It's it adds value to what you're doing as you're trying to manage a global program, and that is more than just a notion. You have to have a tool, number one, and then you have to understand the techniques that are used in order to manage this, to help your procurement team. Global procurement teams need assistance, and as professionals, we connect with those global procurement teams as they're seeking out diverse solutions for the different commodities or taxonomies that they're trying to source to support and align with their global strategy. So technology is extremely important. And I say that if I didn't put enough emphasis on that, I'm being very serious now. I've worked in companies that have technology, and I've worked in companies that do not have technology. And it is an extra lift and weight that you carry as a professional trying to manage and create a strategy in a company that does not have technology to help support you.
Fantastic.
I can attest to that. I mean, we have technology that helps when we're doing our reporting and our benchmarking. I don't know that I could do it any other way this time. I've done it the same thing, and it's it's a whole different ballgame without technology. I mean, you spend what takes you 6 weeks to do without technology, 6 minutes with it. It makes a difference. I think the reporting is so much better. And I find myself going into a lot more detail because I haven't been on the heels of looking at that spreadsheet that's got 50 columns. And I'm saying, I really don't know what I'm looking at right now.
And the data is old.
Yeah,
That's what
by the
makes it
time you get
sad.
it. But if it takes you 4 weeks to get through it,
Yes.
you're missing
Just
a
let me add
timeline
this,
and some targets.
Shrikant.
Yep.
Yep.
But please go ahead, David.
Um, the here's one piece that technology helps to speed up and and gives your program credibility, and that is certifications. The technology will manage the certifications for you. It will let you know when your suppliers certifications are about to expire 90, 60, 30 days out, and start sending notifications to the supply base saying, hey, you need to get your certification in. A spreadsheet is only as good as when the last bit of information was put into it. If you don't have technology managing your certifications, your program is no good. And if you ever get audited, it's a bad thing, because then you have to go back and start looking for certifications at that moment and at that time, and you're behind the 8 ball. So I'm trying to really show how critically important technology is to a supplier diversity program, because we rely on um, the efficacy of that specific SaaS program to let us know when certifications are expiring. And some of them you've actually lost because the structure of the company has changed. They no longer have the ownership. They lost the control. They found out that they're not operating right, so they lose their certification. There's just so many things that are wrapped up in how technology speeds up your program and gives you more authenticity and efficacy in the process. So I'll stop.
Well, that's been great. So as we think about, we've talked about just the global supplier databases, both from organizations and from technology enabled, if you will. Could you also speak to the impact and the value of economic impact reports and benchmarking and what that brings to global organizations?
Yeah, absolutely. The economic impact report tells the story of how the economics in your region and around the United States are impacted by what you do with your organization. It's looking at direct, indirect, and induced, right? Direct meaning what you pay, indirect what they pay, and then induced is the taxes that are being paid in the regions where you're actually supporting that MBE business, right? Or WBE business or diverse business. Without that, we don't really understand the total impact that we have on GDP. So when we talk about GDP, we're talking from a place of knowledge, empirical evidence that we are in fact driving the economy through supporting the ecosystems that we manage from on a day-to-day basis with our corporations, and then how when we network with these diverse and small businesses, and then give them an opportunity to grow through our network, right, and introducing them, and then the NGOs, and then the conferences and technical shows that we go to. So This economic impact report is something that we run at the end of every year in order to see, did we grow? Did we remain steady? You know, how is it? How are we truly impacting the region or the nation as we source business? This is why it's important for our organization to continue to find ways to penetrate the different taxonomies or commodities that our diverse and small businesses are engaged in. We want to see them grow, right? Even when the economy is down, we can still try to get deeper penetration in each one of these areas where our suppliers are already doing business.
Fantastic. Dr. Smith?
We use the report to identify areas that we can enhance the inclusiveness of diverse firms. So that's how we help to build our strategies. When we begin to look at that economic impact, we can see where we are strong, where we are not so strong, and the areas that we really need to shore up. So that's how we use the economic impact to say, you know, in this area, we could use more diverse firms. So that's how we build our innovative inclusiveness. And so we don't just stop with minority or women. We look across the board to see, okay, you know, we're not using, we were just having a conversation the other day, you know, what disability IN firms are out there that we can use for training, because we're looking at what we're doing internally. So that's how we use it. And we continue to get the executive engagement simply because we're tied to we're tied to the managing partner's office. So a lot of the committees, I'm on about 2 or 3 committees, and that's where we're talking about the economics, sustainability, the social aspect, and the governance aspect. So we're able to bring supplier diversity into that realm to discuss it in depth. So with the economic report and all of that, we're still engaging our executives so that they see that, hey, we've got some room here, or hey, we're doing really great here. Technology, contingent staffing, we're doing very well. Our other areas, we have some room, but we are diligent in our attempts. So we're making sure that we're not somewhere saying, well, we're going to focus on construction, because we don't do construction. We're in the financial industry. We don't do that. So that gives us that opportunity. So certain parts of it, we don't even have to look because we know we don't have that work and we're not procuring goods and services in that arena.
So, you know, kind of putting a finer point on the benchmarking, as companies are going through this journey of trying to put up their, you know, build out their supply diversity programs and so on, I would imagine that different companies are at different stages of that. Some being, you know, pretty much at the finish line, some being halfway through, some getting started. So would it be fair to characterize benchmarking, particularly as offered by technology tools such as Gainfront, for example, like, you know, would it be fair to say they're particularly valuable for understanding how they're doing in relation to their peers in the industry, and therefore enable them to adjust their own programs, their own initiatives, how they allocate those resources to kind of, and potentially get sponsorship from people they may not already have, that sort of stuff. I mean, is that the value you see of benchmarking, just to kind of be able to, you know, peg yourself versus where the industry is? And how do you view that, Dr. Smith?
Well, when I think about benchmarking, that was one of the things initially that I looked at when I first came on board, was where we were. And then I looked at the commodities that we were buying and the taxonomies. But however, our program's 2 years old. So I also had to look at where basically our competition was, because that was important, and what kind of programs they had put together. But when we put together the Edward Jones program, it was built with Edward Jones in mind. So it wasn't built with, first we had the parameters of the financial industry, but what we looked at is what we wanted to focus on, the entities that we wanted to focus on, the areas that we felt that we could actually make an impact for diverse firms. And we still do that. Benchmarking is kind of, I always tell people, when I talk benchmarking, to me, that's the floor. That is not where we're going to always be. That's the floor. When I came on board, when we benchmarked, that's where we were when I came on board. So I'm looking at where we can grow. And sometimes that spend doesn't show, but that's when you start looking at other opportunities and the inclusion of other firms and more diverse firms versus, when you have a spend like we do, sometimes the numbers will not show the efforts or the opportunities. So we're also looking at benchmarking opportunities, because if there were no opportunities before, you can't expect your spend to increase. But now we've got more opportunities. So likewise, your spend is going to increase, or it will change where we're focused at. With our economic environment, we have to look across the board at everything. When I first got in the industry, I always thought, well, if the dollars don't go, we're not really doing what we need to do. But over time, what I learned is it's not necessarily about the dollars increasing. It is about the number of diverse firms that we are engaging and the number of opportunities that we are creating for these firms. But beyond that, what they do after they've been working with us. There are firms that I've worked with that we may have only did a small contract, but they've been able to grow and still thrive simply because they worked with our firm and then they had another opportunity, or they got engaged through the project that we offered. So sometimes it's a little difficult. And for me, originally, it was like, oh, we're not doing it. But now that I see the bigger picture and I have to see outside of where we are and look at where those firms are from the day that I met them to today.
When you think about benchmarking, right? I learned this from my start in my career was like 17 years, and actually it was 20 years in procurement, right? Procurement has a market perspective, right? And then it has a business perspective. And when you're benchmarking, right, it's got to be from a market perspective, right? So supply diversity does in fact have a market, right? And within that ecosystem, there's different levels of supply diversity programs, right? And Ralph G. Moore put together levels of supply diversity that allows organizations to benchmark, right? So you have a beginning program, a basic program, a traditional program, an advanced program, and a world-class program. Where are you in that from that perspective? Where do you sit when you're benchmarking? You can benchmark yourself against another organization, or you can benchmark yourself against the levels and say, I'm here and I want to be here, right? So if I look at who I work for, I know that in fact I want to get my program to an advanced program today. That's my stretch, to get this organization to an advanced program, not a world class, because that's a big leap, right? To go from where we are today to a world class program, and it would choke the organization for me to kind of push that through. So when you think about benchmarking takes into account the best practices. Got to get those rolling. You got to get commitment, and then you have to help your organization understand the business imperative and then the economic imperative. And as you grow up the scale, as you go up this scale, you're taking your organization through those different levels. Do I have best practices? Do they understand the business imperative? Do they understand the economic imperative? Once an organization understands the economic imperative, you're probably at an advanced level, right? They don't get the economic imperative. This is why I said supplier diversity is not intuitive. You have to grow your organization, train your organization as you're benchmarking and say, okay, I recognize where I am. So I have to start here. What are the steps that I need to do in order to get my organization to understand the business imperative? That might put you at the basic program level. What is it going to take for me to get my organization to really understand the economic imperative? That might put you at the advanced level. And as you continue to grow, one day, you get to this world-class program. So the benchmarking is important. And to Dr. Smith's comments, once you get to these levels, right, as you go to these networking events and to the conferences and to the trade shows, you as a supplier diversity professional, privately, in your own little closet, you go, I really need to be like that company, right? And then that company might be a world-class company. And you spend some time with that supplier diversity professional and say, how did you get your company from basic to world-class? And they'll tell you the story, right? And you can take some of those things gone right, things gone wrong, and use it in your program. But you're always looking at these levels of supplier diversity programs to benchmark and say, this is what I ultimately want to get to.
This is great. Okay, so we've talked about the importance of supplier diversity and its benefits, but it seems to me that finding the right suppliers is just the beginning, right? Once we've selected these diverse suppliers, don't we have to then, obviously we have to contract with them, right? They have to onboard them. We have to have the supplier relationships in place. There have to be constant measurement and scorecarding. And so as you think about, and this kind of segues to a source to pay solution that is got fundamental core strength in the supplier diversity realm, but also does the whole soup to nuts, right? From actually finding the supplier to really enabling them, onboarding them, contracting with them, measuring them, doing procurement, doing order management. Would you speak to, like, as you think of that whole gamut from A to Z, what comes to mind? Where do you want to put a fine focus on? What do you think are the biggest pitfalls? And frankly, how do you prioritize your efforts in that area?
So, boy, that's a big question, Shrikant. There's a lot in that question. So I first of all have to make sure that the organization understands the significance, the huge significance and importance that best practices have. They have to buy in, right? And the reason why they have to buy into the best practices, the point that I'm about to make means nothing if they don't get it. In order for me to look at the source to settle, right? That's the whole soup to nuts, right? For procurement, I have to have a tool that helps me do that. I have to have a place where I can go to see that my suppliers are onboarded, their certifications are accounted for, their supplier profiles are up to date, all of their certifications are in there, are in this system. Not just diverse certifications, but any other certification that's required for that particular industry. We have a spot to go to. I just said something that probably went over some folks' heads. This technology should account for every one of your suppliers. So you can say 20% of our suppliers are small and diverse, and 80% is non-diverse, and all of the suppliers are accounted for. And I'm gonna go back to something Dr. Smith said. You should be able to break it up into taxonomies, and you should be able to see where your suppliers fit within each one of those taxonomies. And then you can make a decision to say, I want more penetration here, 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 and here. Without that, there's no strategy. Strategy is thrown out the window because you don't know how to plan. You don't have an argument. You have nothing to stand on, nothing to say, this group is doing absolutely nothing to support this enterprise-wide strategy.
Right.
Otherwise, you're just, you're just walking around in the dark. So this onboarding and this whole process, source to settle, should be something that we can hold a technology accountable for helping us manage through supplier diversity. And again, I'm going to say something I said at the beginning of this program, at the beginning of this webinar. It is not intuitive.
Right.
You have to have something that's giving you guidance. You have to have something that you can lean on, go back to, and say, we're missing the mark. It's more than just setting targets. We can set targets. I'm gonna do 6.5%, 11% here, and then at the end of the year, oh, we hit the numbers. If you don't have anything measuring it, you don't know if you hit the numbers. You don't know if all of your suppliers are certified. You're just saying,
Exactly.
I don't know what you're. I don't know how you could manage that. But this source to settle, this source to pay process requires a tool, technology, someone with a skill set and technical knowledge to manage.
Great. Dr. Smith, any thoughts on that?
Well, I agree. And you do have to have a single platform. You have to have one place that you can find everything. I mean, I've had, okay, I got a hard copy over here. I've got this here. I've got to call so I got to do this. And in that time frame, you lose the opportunity. When my colleagues are saying, hey, do we have a diverse firm that does this? I need to be able to pull it and say, yes, I do. Here's the list. There you go. And by doing that, if I've got to pick up the phone and call somebody or do whatever, I'm wasting time. If I've got one place that I can go through all of it, and I actually have been in the trenches doing certifications. So I'm always like, are they certified? Are we sure? So before I hand that off, I'm trying to make sure. But if I have a single place that all of that information is captured, then it works. If I get a call, where are we at in contingent staffing? Where are we at in digital technology? I need to be able to pull it and say, I've got 12 firms here. I've got none here. I've got this. So I do believe that a single technology platform can work, and it streamlines the work for the supplier diversity person, but it also helps in building those relationships. Right now, I mean, you can look at a vendor database and say, ooh, and I don't know how many are diverse. One of the first things that I've always done is when I have started working for a new company, that's the first thing I ask. How many? I need a breakdown of our vendor database. And I find in a lot of times, a lot of the companies don't have such a thing. Or when I worked in public sector, we were the office that certified minority and women-owned businesses. So we knew how many there were of those, but we didn't know on the opposite side of the majority firms. We would have to go outside to procurement and get that information. So I like having it housed all in one. I tend to do reports and say, how many firms do I have in this side? How many do I have in this industry? How many are on this NACES code? Because to me, that's something that works when I'm actually sitting in a room and talking, and I'm in a meeting and I'm trying to show that we could expand our opportunities in this arena.
Absolutely. I completely agree with that, both you and Al. I think that being able to measure risk and actually track the performance of diverse suppliers is, at the end of the day, the way one goes about optimizing the program. And so that is, I completely agree with that. Let me say this. This has been a fantastic discussion. We've got about 10 minutes left. I'm looking at my note here. It says, for some reason, there is a problem with some people are not able to actually put their questions in the chat. So if that is the case, I'm going to request our facilitator to kind of just unmute the audience and please ask questions. Just hop on and ask the question. Let's take advantage of the stellar experts we have here and get any questions. So let's open that up to Q&A here. Any questions? Don't be shy. Come on.
You can raise your hand actually, and then I think we should be able to unmute them. But I have a couple of questions that have come in through chat, so I can at least ask those questions to get started with. So one of the questions that has been asked is, how do you define success in a supplier diversity program?
Wow.
When you think about the Supplier Diversity Program, Supplier Diversity is um, made up of best practices and strategy. The immediate, if you're looking at steps in this process to determine success, you first of all have to answer the first question: have you deployed your best practices? Are they successfully deployed across the enterprise, not in a division, not in a department, but have you successfully deployed them across the enterprise? Anybody who's in supplier diversity understands the huge feat that is to say, I've deployed best practices and I've got commitment across the enterprise. The other area is, do you have a strategy that's driving direction, that's connected to the enterprise? If you've done that, that is a level of success that a lot of programs don't have. That in and of itself is success, because if you have that, then the rest of this will follow, right? You'll be connected to purchasing, you'll be connected to the sourcing folks, you'll be connected to the internal and external communications, you'll have a tier two, you'll have all of these things that are in the best practices, right? You'll have a development program, you'll have a program, a continuous improvement program. I just named off all 8 best practices, but that's where success is bred, right? Then you can begin to set your targets and hit them, not just set them, but then you're set up for success. And you've created the relationships, internal and external. That's my perspective. Dr. Smith?
Well, I think for me, I mean, I do agree with setting the strategies and meeting the strategies and all that. But one thing I will say, it's also tied to the number of, it's tied to the inclusion and basically the number of diverse firms that you've set out. I always kind of set out a personal goal myself. How many diverse firms can I get engaged in my organization? And sometimes, we get the strategies and we get it moving, but I think for me, the tangible one is how many diverse firms did I actually reach and became engaged? Not that I actually got a contract, because we all know that getting a contract can be 6 months to a year process. But how many did I engage where my colleagues are saying, yeah, I called, I reached out to that firm you suggesting, I'm going to make sure that they have an opportunity to bid. That to me is a level of success also. And it becomes a little difficult because I was always one, I need this many, I need these dollars. But how many did I engage that are known in the firm now that I've introduced them to a few people and it's coming back? Because I think that's the key, because one of the things that people don't realize, supplier diversity, we don't really enter any firms into contracts. Our role is, we're opening the door, we're making sure you have an opportunity, we're setting the strategies, but we're kind of we don't write the contracts, we don't amend them, we don't modify them, we don't own them. We're just basically the gateway to say, here's an opportunity, here's some inclusion strategies, I got some firms over here. So I think that for me is also a level of success in a program.
Yeah, no, the programmatic impact is huge, and being able to measure, obviously the quality matters, but just the quantity is really important as well. How much of a reach does a program have, and what impact does it have in the ecosystem? That's a great point. Any other questions? Hello, Sean.
Hi there. My name is Sean Hansbrough, and my question is, how do you create an environment of mentorship for new suppliers? So I'm hearing Dr. Smith say, that we're the gateway, to kind of introduce new suppliers, to other business partners to get them acclimated. But once we get them acclimated, how do you create that environment of mentorship?
That's a good question. So there's a couple of tactics that I use. I have a program that I'm launching and working within the organization I work is called Straight Talk, right? I invite diverse suppliers in twice a year. I have a Straight Talk, and in the Straight Talk, I talk about how to do business with AMN, and then begin to find out maybe the weaknesses of the folks that are within that session. I schedule meetings afterwards, help them understand, you know, everybody who does business with us may not be a good fit, but um, give them direction on what they need to do in order to get to that level. And the other one is I have a program called an ambassador program. The ambassador program, diversity program, for those folks who in fact do fit the mold, right? And to continue to, acclimate them to our business, I partner them with one of our account managers at AMN, and get a commitment from that account manager that we're going to work with this supplier and grow this supplier within our business. So one is, hey, I need to help you develop to become a part of. And the other one is I'm making you a part of and partnering you with an account manager where we can continue to grow your business. So, I mean, that's just two, but there are other ways. Dr. Smith?
Okay, so one of I've got two kind of paths also. We've created a program within our company where we looked at 8 to 10 businesses that we want to work with, and they're on a 2-year track. And we start out doing just the same thing. We kind of do, where are you? What do you do? We do capacity building. We look at the company as a whole. We look for opportunities. I meet with them on an ongoing basis. And when they have contracts, then I meet with the business units that they are working with. We do scorecarding. We touch base on probably a monthly basis. How's it going? What's going on? And so we do a lot of feedback. My second path is we are getting ready to have what I call a flip the script conference. So part of that mentoring is I work with the network, it's the St. Louis Anchor Action Network. And so it's a group of businesses that have come together looking for inclusive, innovative strategies to get diverse firms within our companies. So we are sponsoring what is called Flip the Script. So basically, the procurement people will come in, and instead of the diverse firms chasing business, now we have the procurement people chasing them, seeing their availability, telling them what they have, and wanting to work with them and building that kind of network and that kind of relationship. It's a little bit different, and a lot of the firms kind of struggle with, so I'm chasing them now, but it also gives them an idea of what these firms are going through, what they deal with. And then what happens is there's a connection made that they normally would not have done.
Thank you.
We might have a couple of minutes for one more question before we end the webinar. Anyone else?
I actually, yes, do have one from the chat. I think it was probably like a follow-up on the previous question saying, do you conduct training programs within your organization to raise awareness and understanding of supplier diversity?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, absolutely. I have, we go through it. We completed in sourcing, we completed FAQs. We added a lot of information. We're training our sourcing negotiators. We're educating them. And then we have conscious conversations where we share with them, here's what happens throughout this process. We talk about the inherent barriers and what we can do to work with it. So we do have that. It is ongoing education all the time, because it's not something you deal with on an ongoing basis. And we get caught in the regular, let's just do it. We get caught in our routines. We do our 8 to 5. We get caught in our routines of doing business. So we're always educating and providing information. Al?
Yeah, we do. I just finished a round for our direct and indirect spend and talk to the leaders in those organizations and their folks. And I don't, Dr. Smith, I'm sure you face this too. For some strange reason, and this is going to sound funny, people think that supplier diversity is exclusionary. It is
Yes,
just the
yeah,
opposite.
exactly.
It
Exactly.
is,
And that's why I keep saying inclusive innovation, because that's what we're doing. But yeah,
yeah,
it's almost like you guys are excluding people. It's like, no, we're not.
no, we're creating competition. We want more folks out there competing for the business, which in and of itself, in these trainings, we show creating competition could in fact drive the price down. Think about
Exactly.
that. If you've
Yep.
had price creep on your indirect or direct side, creating competition could drive it down. So supply diversity programs are typically a good cost savings tactic. So yes, we do training. It is a constant training, and I'll repeat something I said at the beginning of this program because it's not intuitive.
Right.
Great. Thank you. We have definitely come to, I wish we had more time. We're top of the hour. And I want to, first of all, sincere and heartfelt thanks to both Dr. Smith and Al. You guys have been absolutely phenomenal. I have, even, we all continue to learn every time I speak with you guys. So thank you so much again. That's the biggest takeaway from this. This is the first of a series of webinars we're going to have this year from Gamefront. So please share. We're going to have an on-demand version of this for those who might not have attended. Feel free to kind of register. You're welcome to share this. And for those, I'm not able to see what the attendee list is, but I would invite and welcome others for the next series, which I believe is in the next month or in the next few weeks. We'll be getting back to you on the details. But once again, thank you, and hope this was helpful. And have a good day.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.